Hey guys, number one Marmaduke fan here. I've been hearing Cuddles meowing in the background, and he paused for a second, but I don't think that old man cat's gonna be pausing for long. So, welcome to Marvel versus Marvel versus Marvel versus Marvel versus DC, the series with no logic or rhyme and reason. I just tell you what comics I read this week and how much fun I had reading comic books this week. I've been thinking about like Comicstorian and Comics Explained recently because I kind of love and hate their channels. Like I'm always thinking, how can I make content like that? I'm always trying to find like what's that niche in the YouTube algorithm that hasn't been filled yet. And what I think hasn't been quite filled yet is, I don't know, maybe like a Reader's Digest of the Marvel universe. Because one thing I'm thinking a lot about is how the Zoomers all like manga, and I'm old school enough that I have a real respect for the Marvel and Marvel and DC both. But it's really hard to get into, and I keep kind of like puzzling over this problem. And I always go back to when I was a kid and the library would have big fat Marvel Essentials books in black and white on awful cheap paper. And you would basically read, a stack of comic books this thick, and you would get your comprehensive history of the Avengers, right? And even if you didn't, like, I didn't read Iron Man, I read a little. Like my library had like one volume of Fantastic Four from the 60s, but nothing from like the 80s and 90s, so I don't know much about that period. But, just getting the Avengers, you would basically get like a little quick catch-up history on everybody else, because, Captain America would show up, and if his costume was different, then they'd say, oh yeah, I got zapped and I got this new costume. What was it, right? So you would get your little like quick I don't know, like mental placeholder for wherever everybody in the Marvel universe was at, just by reading like the Avengers Essentials books. And I guess you can get them used, but because the Marvel universe especially is like complicated, has all of these different characters competing for attention with each other. It becomes fun once you get into it, but the barrier to entry is higher. And manga doesn't have that problem so much because there's like a really obvious starting point, volume 1, then you go to volume 2, then you go to volume 3. A tweet was going around where they were saying, oh, if you want to follow this story, read Miles Morales 27, and then Amazing Spider-Man 826, and Young Avengers 222. Right? Like, it's absurd. You have to pull out your notebook paper like you're in college class to know what you're supposed to read in Marvel. And then, now for me, since I had that crash course, I can kind of hop around and have a general feel for, the big things that were going on. Like, oh yeah, this is before Spider-Man got the black Spider-Man suit. Oh yeah, this is after. This is before Wolverine joined the X-Men. This is after Wolverine joined. Right. Like I have some basic. I have a basic enough like big picture, low resolution knowledge of the Marvel universe that I can hop in anywhere. These $1 comics, therefore, are perfect for me. But kind of the thing I'm figuring out is this is great for me, but it's not great as an entry point. So what I thought this would be was like, I'll just read these real quick, and I guess it's kind of I've arranged this from like 60s to late 90s, so it's kind of like we'll see the unfolding history of how Western comics evolved and changed over time, because that for me is also part of the fun, is seeing how the comics industry sort of adjusted to meet demands and kind of changed as the culture changed. So Super Scroll is a reprint of Thor 142. It's the Stan Lee, Jack Kirby classic combo, and this is from what I call like the Bugs Bunny era of superheroes, where people say, oh, superheroes are our modern mythology, they're like the Greek gods. Now the superheroes of this era were more like Bugs Bunny than they were like the Greek gods, because the bad guy would show up, the good guy would fight the bad guy, and the good guy would beat the bad guy. That's the end of the story. And that was what everyone was. Now, there were still some neat little setups in this one. Like like Stan Lee will show you, like, what's her name, the girl who loves Thor. And if you're wondering who they are, don't worry, reader, tune in next time and you'll find out what their deal is. Now let's get back to our main plot. And the main plot is Thor fights the Super Skrull, and Thor beats the Super Skrull. Right? That's so straightforward. So that's kind of what would this be? 142. So this can't be 60s. This has got to be like late 70s, maybe early 80s, but still kind of in an era of like, we're going to wrap up the whole story in one issue. This is a great issue for seeing Jack Kirby's strengths and weaknesses as an artist, where my thoughts on one of the reasons I like comics is that the person who could never have been like a great painter could be the greatest comic artist of all time, where, like Kirby does this insane abstract stuff that almost has you thinking like, oh wow, like surrealist painters, right? So he has this wild, vivid imagination. He'll do like these really crazy over-the-top poses, like with this guy like dabbing as the crackles all around him. But then he'll like have like these wonky hands and like these weird, kicks and poses and stuff, where he's weak as an illustrator, but he has such a dynamic imagination with his details and everything that it makes for really fun comics. And then the converse of that is you could be a absolutely phenomenal illustrator who doesn't make good comics because your work has no oomph to it. It doesn't kick you in the pants at all. And I think that's kind of like the defining trait of comics, is because things are happening from panel to panel. You have an opportunity to introduce a little oomph in every panel. But that's a different experience than just a single painting illustration that you stare at and you study every little detail of it. It has to flow from panel to panel with a lot of quickness and, dynamism to it. So great old-timey style comic. Now, Fantastic Four and Iron Man. This is Iron Man 118 and Fantastic Four 357, kind of like from the mid-'80s, late 80s. You start seeing the style of storytelling evolve a little bit towards ongoing stories and cliffhangers. So both of these end on a cliffhanger where you have to tune in next week to see what happens. Who we got on this one? Tom DeFalco. I've loved everything with Tom DeFalco's named on it. I've loved. Paul Ryan as the penciler. Danny Bulanati as the inker. Hadn't heard of them before. For Iron Man. By the way, if you like Iron Man, you got to check out the Right Geeks channel. She's like a real Iron Man geek. She's been doing this great series where she'll just choose a random Iron Man comic and compare it with the most recent Iron Man comic. Very well read on Iron Man. I don't know much about Iron Man except what I learned about him from his appearances in the Avengers. So this one's David Michelini on the plot and script, and John Byrne. And what's interesting about this is John Byrne does the layouts of this one, meaning like the quick sketch, and Bob Layton did the finished art and helped with the plot, right? So finished art means he didn't just like ink it, but he also kind of like tweaked and updated Byrne's loose sketches as he inked it. Byrne is a great, but one of the things I've noticed about Byrne is he has the equivalent of like awkward manga face syndrome, where an artist draws everything beautiful, but then like there's that one anime weeb girl who's got like the eyes that are off center and upside down or something. Right? Oh man, what's up with that face? So sometimes when I'm reading John Byrne, I'm thinking, oh man, what's up with that face? Oh no. But Bob Layton, because Bob Layton's doing the finishes, it's kind of like the great things in Byrne's style. His detail and his dynamism is preserved, and Bob gets to fix the faces basically and actually make that a strength of this issue. So like Tony Stark has this really rugged face and does a range of expressions. The girl has a beautiful face. I guess that's not the best one. She's a little wall-eyed there, but actually that's overall a strength. Like evil guy, dark shadowy face. Like his black guy actually has like black noticeable facial features. That's great. So there's facial variety, variety in expression. There's a black good guy and a black bad guy. What? A black bad guy? What is and just like a great little spy adventure with Tony Stark. Someone's trying to kill Tony Stark and he's got to survive it, right? And so that just a lot of fun. Fantastic Four, what I've read of Fantastic Four is kind of like the really, really old Jack Kirby, Stan Lee stuff. I haven't read anything basically from the 80s to the 2000s. So there are a lot of like details of the Fantastic Four's history I wasn't caught up on, but I had this one spoiled for me because this one has like a great twist ending that people would spoil and joke about. So I won't spoil that here, but basically it's kind of like the Fantastic Four are a dysfunctional family. They're always joking around. There's always like romance subplots that are driving a wedge between them. And this comes down to a bare knuckle fight between the Thing and the Human Torch before the dramatic revelation. Okay, so the theme is still like fun, good guys, bad guys. There's a little evolution towards a more serial ongoing story style in the 80s. Now we're getting into the 90s and 2000. So Wolverine number 37. I hadn't read this before. This is my favorite comic I've read in months. This was so much fun. So Larry Hama of Transformers and G.I. Joe fame. I think Larry Hama worked on Transformers. But anyway, he's on the script. Mark Silvestri on pencils and Dan Green on ink. So this one hit all the cylinders just right. It is continuing an ongoing story, but it tells you everything you need to know, and it kind of leaves you off on a nice resolution point with a setup for further adventures, but really wrapping up everything that needed to be wrapped up. So it's Wolverine back in time in World War II. Oh, I want to get the colorist's name too. The colorist is Glynis Oliver, and the coloring really stood out to me in this one. So it's Wolverine, and Wolverine's getting to chop apart fascists, which is so much fun, and he's going into his primal rage. I like how, it's solid red there as he's cutting through someone. I like this page because there's a lot of subtle blues, and then just a little bit of yellow here, and then it zooms in on the map to kind of pop the map forward from all the blues. That's some great stuff. What's fun about this one is it's cranking up the exaggeration, but it's doing it so Rob Liefeld, right? Rob Liefeld's the one who gets roasted all the time for not drawing feet. But I do kind of appreciate how Rob Liefeld was actually going for something. He was departing from realism to crank up the dynamism, but he would take cheap shortcuts. But it's sort of like I don't like it when people just dump on Rob Liefeld. I understand the problems in his style. What's nice about this is that it's sort of capturing the warmth of a Rob Liefeld comic, but without all the shortcuts of Rob Liefeld. Basically, it's still got that warmth and that exaggeration to it, but it is sort of maybe going in for like a second draft, right? Like, so if your first draft of your pencil has all the warmth in it, but the arms are wrong, your second draft is where you either save the drawing or kill it. And that's actually kind of like the relationship between penciling and inking too. A really good penciler could be ruined by a bad inker. The inker's job is to try to preserve the warmth of the penciler's work and add some flair to it in the inking style. I wanted to highlight something in this because this had some really, really great character moments for Wolverine. So he's in a life or death battle with Lady Deathstrike, and they end up kind of through this weird time travel journey, and he basically makes fun of Lady Deathstrike because her father died, and that's like her sensitive spot where she has this point of honor about avenging her father. And so because she's evil, Wolverine makes fun of her father's face getting barbecued because he knows that's exactly the thing that's going to get under her skin and ruffle her feathers. And it's so ruthless. Wow, he's making fun of her dead dad. And then just a couple pages later, as they're hopping around in time, there's this little girl, right? And he tells her to close her eyes. And she says, "Mr. Wolverine, can I open my eyes now?" "Not yet, kitty girl." And what I love about this is what makes Wolverine a great character is he's ruthless towards evil, yet he's like a big butterball, soft boy whenever he's taking care of an innocent little kid or a teenager like Kitty Pryde. He would call Kitty Pryde Pumpkin, and that's wonderful. It's a contrast because he's mean to the bad guys, he's nice to the kids. Fantastic archetypal stuff. I just love this comic so much. Anything else? Yeah, it stands out on its own. Great. Sets you up for the next issue. Great. And you feel satisfied having read it. What a fantastic issue. This one, JLA #1. So I haven't read as much DC. I've basically exclusively read really old Superman and Batman comics, like 1940s to 1960s stuff. And then I read a chunk of 90s era Batman stuff. So I've never read much JLA. But what I liked about this, it was Grant Morrison. And then, where is it? It pops up a little later. There we go. Okay, Grant Morrison writing, Howard Porter penciler, and John Dell is the inker. So one of the interesting things is Grant Morrison is kind of one of the big three of comic book writers who postmodernized superheroes. People say Frank Miller, Alan Moore, and Grant Morrison usually are the guys who get brought up as the writers who sort of brought superheroes into the postmodern age. And what I like about this is kind of this isn't quite deconstructing the superhero. It's asking one of the questions that is a mark of deconstructing superhero comics, but it's still fun and it still has good versus evil. So it's sort of like that saves it from becoming like this cerebral, big brain superhero question book. No, comic books should be fun. There should be good guys and bad guys. So Grant Morrison basically has like these bad guy aliens show up who want to save the world by taking control of everything. So I guess the big brain question behind this is, who watches the Watchmen? If the superheroes show up and say they're going to kill all the bad guys and fix all our problems, who holds them accountable if they decide they want to abuse that power? Right? Now, for the Justice League, this is obvious. They want people to be free. So when these guys inevitably start murdering all the bad guys and taking away all the freedoms, somebody tries to kill the Justice League, and the Justice League settles this by saying, okay, we know they're the ones who tried to kill us. We know they're brainwashing people, so we're not going to play nice guy anymore. We're just going to go kick their butt. Even if it gets us a bad rep in the public press because some people like what they're doing, we know the truth. We're going to go fight for it. We're not going to let them walk over us. That's great good guy versus bad guy stuff. So kind of has like a... Oh, yeah, so what I wanted to say about the art styles, it was sort of like DC was playing catch-up with the Marvel style of comic books, where Marvel had kind of like this real explosion of dynamism in its comics, or exaggeration in its comics, and then a few years go by and DC plays catch-up, and they start bringing in some of that dynamism, and, you know, like in this pose, like, let's exaggerate everything. Let's have lots of characters. Oh, another neat thing about this issue is... what's his name? Kyle Ritter, the new Green Lantern, right? Like the artist Green Lantern of the 90s. They had this whole nice theme where he doesn't feel like he's part of the Justice League yet. Like, they're the big deal. He's just a kid. He's not sure he belongs on the team yet. And somewhere, like, Diana just gives him some encouragement. So he calls her Wonder Woman. She says, "It's Diana. Don't stand on ceremony, GL. We're in the same league, says you." That's great, because she's being cool and supportive and like helping the new guy out and helping the new guy feel like he's part of the team. She's not a B-word biting off people's heads. She's just helping him out. She's like, cool mom. That's cool mom, Wonder Woman, cool mom. And he is gradually building his confidence. He's not kicking down the door and saying, I'm the greatest ever, and everybody instantly loves him. He has to earn his spurs on the team. There's this great life or death fight where one of the characters nearly dies, just barely trying to keep him alive, and then like a creepy, sneaky Batman shows up and they're going to go to war. Okay, great. Fun little comic. Now, it leaves off on a cliffhanger. You're supposed to go buy the trade paperback, but a real fun issue, and I don't know, it makes me want to go get the trade paperback. So this is my absolute favorite out of the whole batch. Wolverine number 37, great era, great execution, great vision, great coloring. Everything was hitting all the right cylinders. So kind of what was the point? So through the decades, comics are getting more complicated. They're starting to ask maybe bigger, self-reflecting questions. But still, even while asking some of these self-reflecting, that's not the same thing. There's a difference between being a midwit. That's it, the midwit meme. So the midwit asks all of these cerebral questions that they think make them super smart and smarter than the dumb people. But really, the midwit isn't really adding anything that interesting. Oh, what if superheroes are the real fascists? What if zombies are the victims and we are the real monsters? We are the virus. Nature is healed. Right? That's midwit stuff. But if you actually have some like good and evil and some fun good guys fighting bad guys to your comic, then a little bit of that kind of intellectual stuff doesn't hurt, because you still have like a good heart to it. You still have someone to root for, and you still have kind of like the wholesomeness of good conquering evil. It's when you let like the big fat question, who watches the Watchmen? When you don't have like something fun and something solid to back that up, it becomes like this navel gazing. Like, we're so intellectual, we're going to ask all these big questions about these fun characters rather than just having fun with them. But when you do have that good and evil theme, then the questions add to it rather than detract from it. That's the point. 20 minutes. Gosh, I lost my touch on keeping this brief. I love you guys. Catch you later.